Not pushing.
It's a magic touch.
Who's over there?
You gotta work out those subs.
Yeah, just lean it.
So Jane was coming. She's sitting in the car.
Jill.
Jill's out there too.
Yeah.
Jill's sitting out there too.
Yeah, Jill's right there. You got 4 minutes. Chop, chop, girls.
That's right. Inside dry off.
I know Jane has one.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if it was leak or you were. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. I was just gonna say. So, just have to repeat what she said. That's all.
She has an umbrella.
He just doesn't know.
That is Angelique.
Angelique. Bridges. Why is it every time we have a special meeting it rains?
Oh, quit.
So you made a run for it?
I knew it would.
You made a run for it.
Yeah.
You need a copy.
Yeah, I thought we were gonna make copies. You got, I got, they got some. Go ahead and call our meeting to order if we can all rise and say the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We can get a roll call. Kathleen?
Angie Byers,
Yes.
Robin Klosterman,
Yes.
Brad Waldoff,
Yes.
Jill Winley,
Yes.
Jane Willenberg,
Yes.
Kathleen Smith, yes.
We have Angelique Bridges here. She'd like to address the board this evening. If you want to go ahead and come on up.
Thank you for allowing me to speak, board members. What I'm about to read, I actually emailed all of you last night, so you may or may not have that in your email boxes. But I'm going to read a letter that I wrote out for all of you. Dear Effingham School Board members and administrators, my name is Angelique Bridges, and I am writing as a concerned mother and citizen of the Effingham community. I first want to preface by saying I have the utmost respect for all of you and what you are doing. I have nothing but wonderful experiences with this district, and I also realize the tremendous amount of pressure that you are undergoing at this time in history. My husband, who's behind me, Jeremy Bridges, and I have 4 children that are currently in the Effingham district. We have 2 high schoolers, 1 junior high, and 1 in 1st grade. I have toiled and prayed and thought a lot about what I wanted to address in this letter. And I am choosing to talk only about one issue more than the others because it's the one that affects my family the most. And I cannot, in good conscience, stay silent about my feelings about this upcoming school year, even if my words result in 0 change. Let me tell you how the school year, as it is laid out right now, will affect my family. My 6-year-old has asthma. She is unable to wear a mask because, in her words, she can't breathe. Masks also scare her. When a mask is on, a person cannot see when another is smiling, laughing, frowning, or even sticking their tongue out. Facial expressions are vitally important in teaching social and emotional development in young children. Facial expressions coupled with the interactions between students and teachers, hugs, high fives, and pats on the back form the foundation of the classroom, which is connections and relationships. As an early childhood educator myself for 20 years, I can tell you with certainty that most young children and even many special education students do not have the skills to take their masks off when they're gonna sneeze, cough, or blow their nose. Those teachers will have more unsanitary conditions than the mask will allegedly prevent. One of my high school students has an IEP and struggles with breathing issues as well. She cannot breathe with a mask on. She also struggles very much in her academics, and most of the time it's her friends and extracurricular activities that are the things that keep her going. If these things are taken away from her, I fear very greatly that this year will be too much for her and she will simply drop out of school. She has already expressed that to me when she was doing remote learning. Another child of ours is hard of hearing and wears hearing aids. If his teachers have the masks on, he will not be able to see their lips, and he also will not be able to hear how the teachers speak properly, which will in turn affect his own speech. And if he himself wears a mask, he will be unable to hear the sounds properly, and his speech will degrade. If I had my way, there would certainly not be a mask utilized in any way. There have been 0 long-term studies to show the effectiveness of mask wearing in children preventing any viruses. The fact that nobody can come up with one agreed upon set of guidelines should be proof enough that we should not use this as an experiment on our own children. According to the CDC, from February to June, there have only been 13 deaths of children under the age of 14 in the entire United States. I was unable to find out the statistics for Effingham County, but my guess is that it would be 0 children have died. Children are the least likely to get this virus and the most resilient to it. I have resigned to the fact that the mask issue is here to stay, even though myself, I have medical issues and am unable to wear a mask as well. But I would ask you to at least consider the following: allowing children and teachers that have a doctor's note for those who cannot tolerate a mask, allowing mask breaks for children and students, and allowing children who cannot tolerate a mask because of anxiety or breathing issues to take it off and then allow them a break. And when they're feeling better, they can put it back on. I also ask for face shields for any teacher or student who asks for one. My children want to be back in school. My husband and I want them desperately back in school. Quarantined with 4 children was very difficult. Remote learning is not an option for us when both my husband and I work full time. And besides, my high schoolers already said they wouldn't do the work anyway. And I believe them that they wouldn't. So I know that there are many other parents in this community who feel the same way that I do. And I just ask that you take our thoughts into consideration. And I thank you very much for allowing me to speak this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wished to address the board? Did anybody contact you?
No.
Okay. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the district policy, the face coverings discussion. We have it updated.
Okay, one of the,
You're fine.
shared with you the face covering policy from our legal representatives. At this point, we have, in our previous discussions, talked about requiring masks. There's been some action by the governor against a couple districts on this issue as well. As you can see, there's 4 areas of when they may be removed. One of the things, after talking with the administration cabinet in regards to number 4, individuals having trouble breathing, that'd be an emergency situation. There are some reasonable accommodations written into that policy. So that would be section 3, the 3rd paragraph down. That would have to be from what's being proposed is in regards to a medical issue, and those one of those accommodations could be such as a face shield or other reasonable accommodations. So it kind of addresses that. Now, IEP situations with students, that's on a case-by-case basis, and the IEP team will have to make those determinations. One of the issues that has been discussed, at least at the administrative level, are actual consequences on violating the policy. And when we say consequences, we're talking about the district. We talked about having this as a medical issue and not a discipline issue. However, it becomes an issue of insubordination or just refusing if somebody comes to school and says, I'm not going to wear that. Talked about that at the junior high and high school level, as the steps possibly to put out there are, if that comes up, that the administration would have a conversation with the student and a call to the parent and expressing that this is the policy and it will be implemented. If it continues or they refuse, then they could be removed for the day. And if it continues, then possibly removed to remote learning. So I guess that's what I'm putting out there for discussion. And so our administrators would understand what are our parameters as well from the Board of Education. So I guess I would ask for feedback on this policy. Again, this came from our legal representations, so it's been vetted through them.
Why does it have to be a policy? I mean, a written policy, as if there's, something to break. When the face mask eventually will go away.
Well, I guess for clarification for administratively to implement this, so there's consistency, that's why we had asked for a policy. At the very back, it also talks about if that changes upon any change or withdrawal of the joint guidance, then we could adjust that immediately.
This seems moving down the road towards making it a discipline issue versus a public health issue seems in contradiction to what we heard, at least from the high school administrators. I know when this came up before, I thought that they felt pretty firmly this should not be a discipline issue.
So, if it's okay. So there's nothing in here, there's no discipline consequence in this for a student. Essentially, the idea here is if we get a student who refuses, it is a health issue. And this is what they're required to do, this is what we're required to ask them to do. This is the policy. I think I shared with you before, so what we've talked about is the idea that, we've got to have that conference with a student that says, hey, this is the policy. If you can't adhere to that policy, then you're going to have to choose remote learning. And we have that conversation with the parent. With the idea that if it is something that comes again, that the defiance on the second time is essentially your choice. You've made your choice. So in that regard, I guess what is it about it that makes you think of it as discipline? I guess
Well, no,
maybe
just
that's the
because
best
it
way
said may subject the
Right.
individual to disciplinary action.
clearly states disciplinary action.
Uh-huh.
And it says
Karen, I'm with you,
consequences.
I agree with more of what you said.
It says
Right.
consequences.
It says
Yeah.
consequences. So constitute a violation of the district's applicable rules of conduct. May subject them to disciplinary action. I mean, that's a little stronger word. Is that coming from the attorney?
Yeah, that's what this policy is. I mean, it could be adjusted. I mean, that's why we're putting it out there for discussion, obviously. I mean, in regards to, let's take vaccinations.
Right.
There's a certain date and they don't have them, they're excluded. So in that issue, I think from a health standpoint, it is an exclusion.
Well, and I think that's kind of what Kurt said. If you don't wear the mask or the face covering, you're excluding yourself from in-person learning and you're selecting remote learning at that point. And I think we somehow, I'm not the one to articulate that.
I mean,
We need to articulate that in here versus disciplinary action, which to me this reads.
Yeah, it almost seems like if we're not wanting that disciplinary part to be in there, can we just
And we can-
say an individual's refusal to wear a face covering in accordance with this policy shall constitute a violation of the district's applicable rules of conduct and prevent the individual from entering the district's building,
Right.
facilities, or transportation. Just take the phrase out. It's got
To disciplinary action.
action in
Yeah.
it.
that's what I have, just listening.
Yeah. I like that.
So how many times are we going to give these kids a warning before we say they're going to remote learning?
Well, our discussion is it needs to be a hard and fast rule if we're gonna have it.
Right.
Mhm.
So if it's gonna be the policy and that's the rule we're gonna have as a district, then we can't have administrators trying to, now, let's be realistic, junior high and high school is different than,
Sure.
Kindergarten, fifth through fifth grade, right?
Right.
So there, we talked about that today about being on some leniency there and understanding, just as you don't treat third graders as you do juniors. So the idea is, but at the junior high and senior high level, that those would be, and if I'm speaking out of turn, please let me know, but in our discussion as administrators, the idea to be able to administer this needs to be consistent. And so if that student refuses to, then there'd be a conference with the parent and the student, and then moving forward. If they continue that, then they have made a choice, as Kurt said.
So to go along with that, if we turn back to the reasonable accommodations section, I have a little bit of a concern about other bona fide reasons. I'm surprised. that
Yeah,
we
that's
put that
illegal.
in there. That's about as vague as you can get. So if I
That's-
take the mask off, I feel like I've got a bona fide reason. I don't know who determines what a bona fide reason is, but you, I guess, Mark? I mean.
I always stick to
I- I
medical
don't-
condition or disability condition.
Absolutely. I
Um,
would like to see that statement taken out. I wouldn't want to try to enforce a bona fide reason. Not in something like this. I think a medical condition or disability.
So the way that would read if I hear him right, individuals who cannot tolerate a face covering due to a medical condition or disability-related condition may be permitted to utilize.
Yes. And then the next sentence after that, the superintendent or designee shall have discretion to determine whether an employee, visitor, or third party qualifies for reasonable accommodation. Who determines if a student does?
Well, that'd be the principal. That's the
Do we need to
designee.
say
The
that in here?
Student
That-
is not in there.
The student's not in that section on who determines reasonable accommodation. So can we add a
Oh,
sentence?
okay, I-
Building administration, or
Sure,
if
sure,
it's
sure.
you, add student to that sentence. Or if it's building administration, then we need to say that in a sentence.
Well, that would be designee.
Yeah, that,
Okay,
But what he's saying is it says employee, visitor, or
Right.
third
We just
party.
need to
It
add
doesn't say the
student.
words.
we need to
oh,
add
okay, so
student
okay,
to
I
that.
hear, I see what you're saying.
But it also, when face coverings may be removed, in number 3, it says individuals are outside
Well,
and social distance, so it's not inside socially distant. If they're inside and socially distant, can the mask be off?
At this point, we're having them on.
This is-
Okay.
Well, then the next sentence goes ahead and says, for a student with a medical condition or disability. So now they're talking about students. And then it gives examples, but it said will determine, such as IEP team, 504 team, health plan team, will determine whether the student qualifies for a reasonable accommodation.
The only issue with that, that handles the IEP, the special ed
Right, I guess
issue.
what I was saying was maybe that's why the word student wasn't in the list above, because that whole sentence.
So to clarify, 1, 2, 3, fourth line down, under reasonable accommodations, the superintendent or designee shall have discretion to determine whether a student, employee, visitor, or third-party individual qualifies for a reasonable accommodation.
Yes.
And the only other thing I saw in that sentence was use alternative options such as a face shield or other reasonable accommodation. Are we using the Department of Health link down below for, that's for mask use?
Yeah.
Do we
I don't know,
give somebody a resource on what other reasonable?
I don't know what
accommodations
those would
are?
be, to be honest with you. Maybe it's part-time, partial time of wearing it.
Do those need to be spelled out?
Well,
I mean,
that
that's
means
not-
we'd make a list that could be way too long. I don't know what other accommodations right off the top of my head there could be. I'm sure there are. Could be a time issue. It could be an area issue, where here, where not here, those types of things.
That's all I had.
Okay, so if we're doing something different for K through 5 and maybe doing something different for junior high and high school, I still go back to the question where, how many times are we going to allow them? Because we don't want our administrators to constantly enforcing this face mask policy. So how many times are we going to have them be able to have this conversation with these students about not wearing them before
Well,
it's
it sounded to
remote?
me like 6 through 12, you were saying it would be probably a meeting with the parent and the
Yep.
students. And after that, if there was another incident, that would
Yep.
Then it
perhaps
would
be
go
it.
to remote. Is that what we're
Yeah,
saying?
they pretty much made their choice.
Okay.
I mean, administratively, otherwise you're gonna be, how am I gonna count?
Yeah.
You wore it once, you wore it.
Right,
Mhm.
right.
I mean, you'd be doing it all the time. Okay. Were there any other questions regarding our policy for face coverings?
Well, I do feel good that I believe some of the issues that we heard Ms. Bridges speak about are covered here as far as accommodations and so on.
Okay. Would we want, is there anyone that would want to make a motion to approve the face covering policy for the 2020, 2021 school year?
I will make that motion.
Motion by Brad. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second, Robin, roll call.
Robin Klosterman,
Yes.
Brad Waldoff,
Yes.
Jill Winley,
Yes.
Jane Willenberg,
No.
Kathleen Smith, yes. Angie Byers.
Yes. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move on to the back to school plan discussion.
Okay, before I want to hand out just the updated learning option information in the form. Just got that this afternoon. This isn't a. Okay, this is information from the learning option form that we've sent out, and it's on, the link is available. Just updated from 3 o'clock this afternoon, a couple hours ago. We've had 1,348 total responses. That's over 50%, so that's pretty good. Of that, 1,184 have requested in person, and 164 have been have chosen option 2, which is family choice remote learning. I rounded, it's 88% in 12. It rounded, I think it's 87.9. So 88% have chosen in person and 12 have chosen family choice. So I broke those down by grade level at this point. And so just kind of going through those. Pre-K 6 and kindergarten 10, first grade 17, second grade 11, third had 12, fourth grade 11, fifth grade 11, and then sixth grade 13, seventh grade 13, eighth grade 17, and then ninth would be 15, 10th would be 9, juniors we have 7, and seniors we have 12. So, and then I broke them down by building. So you have remember that there's one or two sections of second grade out at Central. So, but, 28 at South Side, 34 at Central, 43 at the junior high, and 43 at high school. And that's as of 3 o'clock. So, wanted to share those with you as we started going through there. Does anybody need a hard copy of the plan?
I do.
Yes.
Has it
Thank you.
changed?
You want that way?
No, I don't want that.
She did. Thank you. I have to
Okay, understand this is a draft. This is for discussion and trying to move things forward. So discussion here is, obviously trying to get some direction to move items forward. So couple of the items to look at as we go through here. And we have principals and directors here as well. But I'll just kind of go through learning options first. There's option in-person learning. It's kind of spelled out. Daily attendance, regular communication, grading, GPA, graduation requirements are in effect. Unit 40 is going to practice social distancing as much as possible across the district. And we're not going to be allowing, at least proposing not to allow visitors, volunteers in the buildings to begin with. And I think we can reevaluate that as we move forward. The learning, the learning option form would also be in here as well, but that can be accessed. Right? And so just those that are watching the streaming, just try to put out there that we need everyone to, first of all, register their child for Unit 40, because quite frankly, I think we have more on the learning option than we have that have registered, which is kind of odd. But so we need everyone to register their child for school, and then also to fill out a learning option form as well. Grades 6 through 12 in person. and we'll talk about the day here in a few minutes, but same thing, grading, GPA, graduation requirements. One of the things I forgot to mention was the IDPH, well, we talked about face covering, so I really don't need to address that, I guess. Family choice, we'll be using Seesaw format for elementary. When I say elementary, we're talking pre-K through 5. Or excuse me, pre-K through 3 be Seesaw, grade 4 through 12 would be, I think we're missing a page. Anyway, 4 through 12 would be Google Classroom.
We were missing 2
Missing
and
page
4.
2, 3, and 4.
I've got 3. And it's a 2 and 4.
Well, we're missing 6 too.
Did we copy it?
I was gonna say it's short
The
a
odd
lot
numbered
from
pages.
All right, well, then I got copied wrong. Well, we'll make a couple copies here. I guess we'll start this way. We'll let Shelley talk and share in regards to some professional development and then also some other information that we needed to share. So Shelley, can you pull the microphone down real quick? Thanks.
So what we have done so far with professional development is we've done an overview of, can you hear me? I know it might be a little muffled. All right. We've done Seesaw grades, preschool through 3rd grade, just an overview of that because it was a new product. And then we've also done some initial Google Classroom. A lot of our teachers 6 through 12 already had experience with that, but 4 and 5 haven't. So we've done a little bit with that so far. There's more to come on that, and I'll get to that in a minute. We also offered back in June a Google 101, which people could do as part of like just a walk you through training or an on your own training. They could choose to do it either way, just to make sure that everybody is familiar with just the Google tools in general. So the Google 101 is different than the Google Classroom because there's a lot that can be done just with the Google tools and not just with the Google Classroom. We also offered with ROE3, they did a virtual Google Camp back in June 4 and 5. And so we allowed participants to do that as well if they wanted. And then we offered virtual educator well-being to people who wanted to do that as well. So what we have on the horizon here is once everything gets kind of squared away with the board, with policies and procedures and everything, the principals are going to meet with their buildings and kind of outline all of the things that are going to occur. So some of that will be what is in-person learning going to look like. They've already met with their staff already to get feedback, but now that you're going to cast that direction and solidify all of that, they need to meet with their staff again just to kind of shore up what will the in-person part look like. They will also be meeting with them to talk about what the family choice remote learning will look like for their building. And then as well as if we have to go into a full remote learning, what that would look like as well. So that's, that could be a long one day, or it could be broken up into a few days. It kind of depends on how the buildings want to schedule that and probably how available staff is, because you want to make sure that all the staff are available. So on the horizon, what we have is, well, currently ROE3 is offering another virtual Google Camp, and this is just for all kinds of Google tools. And so we have some people attending that today and then tomorrow as well. We've offered out Monica Dentish. We hired her in a couple years ago to be a speaker, and she was really great. She's doing a free virtual session, so we sent that out. We're going to send some paraprofessionals to ROE3 in August because they're doing a session called Remote Learning for Paraprofessionals. So we've got people attending that. Scholastic has put out a crazy number of free webinars, so we put that out just for people if they want to sign up to do those. And then in addition, what we're looking at is additional optional, and this is just based on feedback from staff, Learning A to Z is a product we use kindergarten through 5th grade. And so just some general sessions on, we want to make sure we're maximizing it, especially whenever we're looking at remote learning. IXL math, mystery science, math seeds, gizmos, which is something we use at the junior high level in the science classrooms. And then just further support, just the rollout of just instruction in a remote situation. And then frankly, also you can use a lot of this in in-person learning as well. So it's just more tech tools. So we're going to do screencasting, video conferencing, Google Forms, and Gmail. Gmail is something we just switched to, and so we're all clunking around trying to get used to that. And so we're going to offer training for people who don't feel comfortable just kind of clicking and maneuvering their way through that on their own. So we're going to offer that as well. And then we've, with the science materials that we purchased earlier, that you purchased for us earlier, we're trying to get that shored up too. It's not necessarily tied to remote learning, but it's tied to just rolling out stuff for the next school year. So we're trying to get all those dates kind of solidified with the companies too. So that's the professional development that's been done and then is on the horizon. Do you have any questions on any of the professional development?
I've got kind of a continuing question. Came up in the curriculum meeting, and that was a comment was made that not all teachers have laptops, district laptops, and the question was how many in each building are we talking? Because it seems obvious as much training as we're giving them and as the expectation for all of the online teaching that they've
Right.
been doing, they need to have a laptop. Or I don't know, at kindergarten, maybe it's an iPad. I don't know what it would be, but whatever it is, I think we need to provide one for each of them. So that would be my concern, that maybe something their technology committee should be moving on pretty quickly if we need
Well,
to.
that's the plan. I know in one of the documents that we have, we've got the device needs and then also what connectivity needs the staff has, if we go into, a full kind of shutdown like we experienced before. I can't, it'll take me too long to find it on here,
Right,
so.
that's fine.
But yeah, I do have that. We
Okay,
collected that
'cause I'd like to-
information.
Yeah, I think we should see that. And
Yeah.
Right.
We talked, I think, too, about maybe scheduling a technology meeting so we could deal with some of those things. Thank you.
Any other questions on the professional development?
So Shelley, maybe you said this, do you have an individualized training plan that you're recommending for each
Well,
person in the district, or are they kind of
so the
made to self-select based on?
right,
tools
so the
that are
required part of it is they have to go through the staff meetings with their building principal. But part of those staff meetings are going to be classroom management, strategies for remote learning, assessment in remote learning. Some of the things that kind of came out from all of our surveys and data and feedback, we're trying to hit on a lot of that so that we kind of learned from our experience back in the spring, and then we plan to do an effective rollout this upcoming school year.
One of the other things that came up too, and that I think you were looking into was some type of monitoring, like
I
test
did, so
monitoring
yeah, I
software
checked
to
on
be used.
Proctorio. Proctorio did a few years ago integrate with Google Classroom, but it does not now. And the only way you can kind of lock up the device per se is if you have a Chromebook with Google Classroom. So we're still exploring other options, but that looked like a really great avenue. But once they wanted to know what our LMS, our learning management system was, and it's Google Classroom, and they integrate with Canvas and Blackboard, and that because they catered to some big name universities.
Right.
And so, that's not going to work for our situation because we don't use
Right. I
the
know
products.
that was a concern that we heard from
Right.
several teachers, especially high school and junior high level teachers, was
Right.
any type of security if they were testing remotely.
Right. Some things that can potentially be done would be, if you're in family choice, you have fewer number of students you're trying to manage that with, you know, you could do that live Zoom and just watch them, because that's really what Proctorio does, is it just records the whole session from the camera that's built into the computer, basically. So you can kind of do a workaround with that if you needed to, using Zoom. Any other questions on that?
Okay, thank you. Let's go back and talk about the learning options again. For grades pre-K through 5, pre-K through 3 will use a seesaw format. Grades 4 and 5 would use Google Classroom format in excuse me, in option 2, although we're going to be using those formats in person as well. So it could be a natural progression if we have to get to that point. And the idea on family choice remote learning, one of the things that has come up are questions of from administratively on implementing is, you know, we're asking people to choose for first 9 weeks for pre-K through 5. So obviously what happens if, you know, a parent comes and says family choice is not working, can that student then move to in-person? Are we going to allow that, or is this going to be a situation where, unless it's an outside entity involvement, is there any direction that you would want to give us? Because right now, what we're saying is, if you're going to choose remote learning option, it's going to be for the 9 weeks pre-K through 5. The same thing in regards to the other way of starting at school and then going. Now, if it becomes an issue with the mask issue, that's one thing. The issue is going to be administratively and in our classrooms is students moving back and forth. That's a worst case scenario, but and that's going to be hard to manage at some point. Worst case scenario. So what we put in there is, if you choose option 2, family choice, then for 9 weeks pre-K through 5, it's you're in there, or for the first semester for grades 6 through 12. So is there any thoughts, direction? Because that's one of the questions that's come up from our administrators as well, and myself. Unless there's an alternative direction, then we would stick with what's in the plan.
I still kind of have the same issue that I did last time with the 9 through 12, which I know people don't agree with that. I think there could be some circumstances that would warrant a administrator to allow a student back into a school if need be. And we probably need to figure out what those would be, of course. Can't figure out all of them, but I understand the 9 weeks for the younger grades, but I'm still for the 9 weeks for the junior high and high school.
I think the issue that we talked about that makes that a little more complicated, maybe that even if they're taking the same course remotely versus face-to-face, that they may not be in exactly the same spot to just, you know, come back in. I don't know what the administrator's opinions are about that. I know that initially our thought was we wanted to limit the number of students just deciding, and I'm going to change my mind, or people who gave it a go for a week. It was a little frustrating, and so they said, okay, I'm going to change, because that's just going to be totally chaotic. And certainly there could be an instance where maybe it would benefit someone to move, but yet it's just like anything else. You're going to let one do it, you're going to have a bundle do it. So I guess maybe it's a semester, and then in my opinion, the semester, and then the change would occur. I don't know what kind of extraordinary situation it would be. I mean, there could be, I'm sure, something, but to anticipate what those would be, I think would be really difficult.
Yeah, to be able to come up with a list.
I mean, I wouldn't want to deny anyone to come back if they need to come back, but it would be evaluated, perhaps an application or some sort of process and not arbitrary. Oh, it's just not working out for me.
I would agree
Because
with
we
that.
want people to have be committed to the process of being remote. I'm sure that they've gone through careful consideration, you know, in deciding to go to remote. I don't think it was something they just came up with on a whim. I would hope that it's thoughtfully considered. So we should attempt to take them back if it is, again, evaluated and thoughtfully considered on our end. You know, it's a mutual thing.
I agree, because if they're falling behind, because the remote's not working, then when that 9-week period is over and then they decide to come back, they're gonna be farther behind.
What? Oh, sorry.
I did, so we asked the administrators to come because we did want to get some thoughts from you guys. So with this question, to Kelsey and Kurt, the issue that I have is that if you have a student that is falling behind, they can't come back until the end of the semester. They could have possibly came back at 9 weeks to try to catch up to be able to gain that credit. But we're saying, no, they can't. So do you see that to be a problem in your buildings? I mean, I know you can't foresee things, but what are your thoughts on that?
Can I go first?
Absolutely.
Kurt, can you sit up here? Shelley, if you need to go.
I think the bigger question is, why did they choose remote in the first place? Because if they've got the ability just to come and go because something's hard or something's easy, then they should be face to face. If they've got a medical reason or they've got a legitimate concern or they got something like that, then when you look at this, it might be something along the lines of, okay, there might be a big change possibly, but if what we're talking about is somebody who just says, because I'm getting some of this right now, it's more of a matter of convenience or I want to work, okay, then those students shouldn't be going remote in the first place. They should be face to face. And so that's part of the issue that I'm having with the conversation is we've got to ask ourselves, are we going to just let people come back and forth whenever it's either hard or not hard or easy or not easy? Part of the issue with a semester is the fact that we're talking about a grading period. So I get the idea that you don't want someone to struggle. Part of that says that you need to make a wise choice to begin with, right? If we do have a student who really has a legitimate concern and needs to be remote learning, then I think that one of the things we need to do and what's on us is make sure that kid isn't struggling, right? To make sure remote learning is working for that student because they're in a situation where they really can't come back to school. But I don't think that we're trying to create an environment where people out of what's convenient or not convenient can come back and forth.
That I agree with, totally. Yeah, and that's what I meant is hopefully they've made the decision, with thoughtful consideration, and they'll make the same decision to need to come back. So it can't be just an easy come, easy go kind of thing.
You're right. The decision needs to be based upon, the initial decision needs to be based upon, there's a reason why they chose option 2.
Right.
And if that is for concern in regards to a building or being around or whatever, then how does that change 3 weeks from now or 4 weeks from now? It may, but it probably not on a regular basis.
I see your point.
I'm not asking if you want to hear it. If you want.
I agree with him.
Okay.
I do feel like they need to make thoughtful process, absolutely.
Mhm.
If kids are struggling, we should be making effort, to reach them. And if they are extremely struggling, we'll take those specific considerations.
So if we were not in the situation we are now and a student was struggling and it was time to intervene and go to an alternative method at what point would you do that? At 9 weeks or at semester, or would you intervene before then?
As soon as we identify that they're struggling. We're not gonna wait to intervene to help a kid at a quarter time or a semester time or anything along those lines. We're gonna do that as soon as we see the need.
Okay, so if the student doesn't really have an option and their parent says you're doing this, but they are really struggling and can't make this remote learning work, what are we gonna do before the 9-week period to give them that intervention?
Well, it's gonna depend. We become very individualized on what the student needs. So in other words, is it something the student needs to have access to a teacher more often so they can get a greater amount of feedback? Is it something that we need somebody to help to sit down with the student and just organize their time, right? So because that's one of the challenges in remote learning is just organizing what's going on. We're going to be reaching out to parents to understand, okay, what is it they're struggling with? What is it they need? So those are all the interventions, and again, if we weren't remote learning, I probably got a longer list, but I'm not as experienced with remote learning at this point. All right, but this is kind of what the experience has shown us that students struggled with in the spring. And then also being able to just, one of the things we're looking at doing is being able to have a greater communication piece between a student and directly with a teacher and directly with a student. I think that's going to be beneficial that we didn't have in the spring. So those are all those things, kind of what we would normally do, but a little different in remote learning.
I think too, you have to consider what does remote learning look like from a teacher's time standpoint too.
Correct.
When is the teacher going to be available to work with those students? How does that look? What does each building's remote learning plan look like? Because unless you understand what a building's remote learning plan looks like, you don't really know how much help is available to give those kids during that time. So it's really individual to the buildings. So.
And I know that really, I think the issue here is not that we would never let them back or anything. It's a matter of time at the high school level. And at the high school level, a little different at the junior high. One of the scenarios that could come up is you have a student who is, they're just almost impossible for us to take and make what's going on in the classroom exactly the same as what's happening in remote learning. We're going to do the best we can so that everybody gets an education in that way. But let's say that you have a student who has done remote learning for a quarter and another student who has done, and for a quarter they've done in person. And then another student who has done a all in person or all remote learning. Are those equivalent enough that you, at the end, whenever you come to give a grade, that you can say that those students receive, and that's kind of an equivalent grade among those things? So I think one of the things that was talked about with the high school going on a semester is that's a grading period.
I think maybe one of the points, Kurt, maybe you can help clarify this for me. What we're kind of saying now is we're boxing you into one option, or parents into one option. If you select family choice remote learning, your option to come back in person is at the end of the district. Do we need to have language in here that gives an exception process for that situation when you've tried everything to the best of your abilities? But this is all hard for any of us to predict how this is going to go. We like to think great. There's liable to be bumps in the road, right? If that happens, we're saying, I'm sorry, you will come back in 9 weeks or a semester. But if there's an extenuating circumstances, should we put in here that there's an exception process if we need it? Maybe that was the original question.
What are you going to do is sit down and come up with a list? I don't know. In some
I think it can be
regards, I
vague
think,
language.
and for me, to be honest with you, to me, if you choose remote learning, it's because you don't really have a choice to come back, right? There is an extenuating circumstances already that says you're not in a position to come back for whatever those reasons are. Now, again, I'm not coming from experience because I've never experienced this. I'm only going from what I speculate that I see. But if you're not coming to school because you don't really have a choice, then this is kind of a moot point.
We can put something, if we wanted to put some in there, an appeal process to the principal and or the superintendent. And, we can have that we would have that conversation anyway, if that came to that. But if that's what the board wants to do, we're going to handle each situation. We're not going to turn and, we're here for the kids.
Right.
And so we want to try to do what's best, but we also have 2,400 kids. So I think the big thing is to have that communication aspect when people do come up with those issues. What can we do to try to address them before we get to that point? That doesn't always happen, because if a student doesn't participate at remote, I'm not sure how much, I mean, kind of depends on the situation, but we saw last spring that participation drop. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. We don't need to go into that, but we're going to be vigilant in regards to, and our administrators will be, in having, and the teachers, in having those conversations with parents and kids. But one of the concerns is the jumping back and forth.
Sure.
And that's why we're
why
just trying to get some
I think
questions.
there has to be a process. It can't be call Kurt and say, hey, I'm coming back tomorrow. You know, there needs to be a.
And that wasn't,
Written
I don't want anybody to
process.
think that I'm saying they need to
Yeah.
jump back and forth. That's not what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
then my other question would be, if these students are in school and then they choose to go to remote, do they wait till the end of the semester, or do we allow them to go ahead and
That's up
do
to you
remote?
guys. I mean, you guys
I mean,
look
I'm
at me.
I'm
Yeah, it's a
asking
two-way-
what
it's
your
a
guys'
two-way-
Street.
Yeah.
Two-way street.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to, so.
I think the issue with what Kurt's describing, that it should be a medical need only, is we can't put it out there as a choice, though. As a district, we didn't put out there that it should be based on medical, there should be an underlying, we put it out there as a choice. So people who have already chosen to go remote may not understand that we mean it as a medical issue and an underlying medical issue. So I think we have an issue there as well with this first group that's already chosen remote. We didn't put it out there as it should be medically related. We put it out there as a family has a choice. So we need to keep that in mind as we're talking about this.
So when they choose remote, do they put a reason why they're choosing remote, or are they just choosing?
They choose.
They just choose.
Well, and businesses in the area are struggling just like school is. So, I mean, things could change in their home life immediately, and we can't dictate they have to wait 9 weeks to change that if they don't have an option.
Because I think the reason that was given last time was because like it would be a scheduling nightmare, basically, right?
Sure, it will be.
Could be.
I agree that we need to set the guidelines as 9 weeks or semester. I'm not, that I think there needs to be a waiver in there somehow if some situation does come up that they can talk with administration and.
Yeah.
And I just
get
made
that
some
changed.
notes,
I agree. Kathy.
that there's a process that if there's an extenuating circumstances, the family may request a meeting with the building principal and superintendent.
Even emergency situation, like you were
Correct.
talking about,
Yeah,
like all of a
you
sudden
know.
two parents are back at work and there's,
Yeah, you
there's
just don't
nobody
know.
at home now.
Right.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Is everybody okay with doing that, adding that in?
I'm okay as long as we're still leaving in the semester and the 9 weeks
Correct.
as the
Agreed, agreed.
standard.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And it's got to really be an emergency situation before there's a change.
Same.
I think if it's an appeal application evaluation process, we may not say yes, but I think the language should be there.
Agreed.
In regards to health screenings, self-certification, I shared with you a form in regards to self-certification and verification. It's also in the plan as a link that we would be sending out to all parents. In talking with legal and we would be asking that those you can't just sign it for the rest of the year or the semester. So we look at it as a quarter, every grading period. So I'm on page 5. That self-certification verification form would be filled out for each student. This form would be returned once a quarter to the child school's office. And that could be accessed there as well.
How are we going to be, I mean, that's going to be an administrative burden for somebody to track roads, and what if they're not returned?
Well, it's one of those things, it's ISBE, it's not a health department issue.
Right.
It's an ISBE, so it's a required item. So we would make those phone calls and make sure that it gets turned in, as we do with many other items at the school. As far as staff,
Okay, Mark, I'm sorry, I'm
Oh.
gonna jump in here. On these bullets, the only thing that seemed a little odd to me, it seems like when we're talking about the screenings, like the big list of questions to me should be moved up to the top of that section.
Okay.
You know, it makes more sense when you say they have to self-certify, well then give them the questions and then afterwards tell them they need to stay home, they would use Seesaw or Google. I mean, that all seems like
Okay.
it should come after the questions. I don't know, it just seemed out of order for me.
I'll just move that part up. As far as staff, there's also a staff form. I've shared that with you as well, but it's accessible through the plan. And I'll do the same thing there, is move that up to the front. And again, those turned in once a quarter or 9 weeks. Face coverings, that kind of with the policy. I did put a thing in there that remember, these requirements may be subject to change. There's a lot of things that are going to happen probably this week, and we'll talk a little bit later that, in regards to IDPH, they're coming out with some new updates probably Friday or over the weekend. So we'll go that route. Hand washing, hand sanitizer, attendance. We asked, students to come. One of the questions that came up was about incentive programs, and just to make sure that those attendance incentive programs would be suspended for the school year, i.e. waiver of finals and those types of issues. Those would be waived or suspended for the school year. On transportation part, obviously we'd have face coverings for those students and staff. We're going to use assigned seating. Can do 2 a seat. Trying to encourage siblings to ride together. We'll limit 50 to a bus per the
I
guy.
had a strike through on the assigned seating.
That's because it's right above it. There's some duplicate there. So I went back through and
I'm with you now.
so we'll take those things out just so it's in there clear. Social distancing will be maintained to the greatest extent possible, but on a bus, that's going to be extremely hard, especially with 50 kids. And the Centers of Disease Control recommends create a distance between children on a school bus when possible. We'll be sanitizing the buses each day and in between routes. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Jason or Kristen, just on that process?
Yeah,
So
we bought the backpack sprayers. Transportation department has 2 of those, so in the morning when the buses return from the morning routes, they'll be sprayed down with the disinfectant, and then in the evening when they return back to the bus garage, they'll be sprayed down with the disinfectant. This will require all buses to be back at the bus garage every day, which is a little bit of a change, but in order for us to spray them down after each route, we'll have them all back at the bus garage every day, so we can wipe those down, spray them down, and go from there. So.
We have to do the double routes in the morning or the evening, will we disinfect in between those routes? Or do we have a good way to do that?
Yeah, I don't know that we have a good way to do that. If we want to do that, we could look at purchasing some more of the hand sprayers. And then what we'd have to do is after the first group gets off, the driver would have to spray those seats down, and then while they go back out to pick up the second group, hopefully it would dry in that meantime. That could be a possibility, but we only bought 2 backpack sprayers to keep at the transportation bus garage to hit, that way. So, if we have a lot of routes that are doubled up, we could look at that.
I know we
Or just,
asked,
it says in here,
It
in between
should.
routes, so
Yeah,
if we
we
could
should.
just clarify that language to be maybe morning and evening.
I know we asked
Morning and afternoon.
parents to transport their own children if they could to
Yeah.
help alleviate this, but on our registration forms, are we asking them that? Or on these forms, are we asking them if they're gonna be able to?
We're asking in the registration, our problem is we've only had about 960 kids register, because a lot of the parents are waiting more for this guidance before they register their kids. So we've had more people fill out the remote versus face-to-face than we have register.
So we really don't know how that's gonna help us with routes.
Some of those
Registration's way
in
down
talk,
this year.
yeah, I'm sorry. Some of those individuals have called over at the bus barn to talk to Kristen because of, they may ride in the morning, but not in the afternoon. So there's been some communication with some of those families already, which is better now than August 14th or 17th. But that a lot more needs to happen. And so once this is put out, then we would probably get more
So
of
we
that.
really don't know how many double routes we might have.
Well, I don't know. Kristen, you want to come up and sit? Can you move up, please?
As far as double routes, the whole afternoon's gonna have to be pretty much
Kristen.
all of them. So we have 10 in-town routes that will definitely double. And then what I'm trying to do is put all the rules out, like Edgewood, Mason, out of the lake, out towards Kept Town, all that area. Because if not, those kids are gonna be sitting and waiting and waiting. So that is my goal. I don't know without numbers what's going to work. So the sooner we get everyone registered, the better off we will be to know how many more we would have to double, or if we would have to hire somebody, an additional bus or something like that. So
Part of transportation is also going to be dictated by what you decide on the scheduled day. Because there's multiple different start times, multiple different end times coming, which is greatly going to affect how Krista can schedule buses.
Any comments or questions for Kristen or as while she's here? Okay. There's Denise. So thank you, Kristen. Denise, you want to go ahead and come on up? You're the next contestant. Food services, this is an issue, with cafeteria and space and protocol that has been probably some of the most or the hardest or most difficult to work with for our administrators. So a couple things in there that, if additional serving areas or seating areas can be handled, we'll try to do that. There's a possibility going outdoors, but that's obviously a weather-related issue. Trying to stagger groups that come in. You want to talk just a little bit on the meals part for the board,
Sure.
please?
This year, all the meals will be plated and handed to the students. In years past, we have had cold bars where they could, make some selections and have some choices. But of course, this year we won't be able to do that. So everything will be on their tray when they get it. Their silverware, their napkin, their straw, their milk, everything will be on there.
The lines at the
And
high
that's
school?
K through 8. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's what I said.
Yeah,
The high school.
that's K through 8. The high school will be somewhat different. Of course, we probably won't be able to do the salad bar because we won't be able to do anything where there's any kind of shared utensils that they have to touch, But we hope to be able to do like prepackaged things, a sub sandwich or yogurt or things like that, where they could maybe pick those up.
So I got a question about the scanning the lunch cards. At the lower levels, do those kids have their own lunch cards? Are they handing them off to the lunch person? Or how does that work, just to keep them from constantly giving them back and forth to others?
Well, that's the way it's worked in the past,
Mhm.
but our NutriKids point of sale system has a built-in roster for all the classes, so, we don't have to have the contact with the cards.
Okay.
The cashier can just use the roster.
Okay.
And we're looking at mobile devices too that have our NutriKids system on it, where when we have to serve in areas other than the kitchen, or the cafeteria, we can have our mobile device there, and we can record the students' lunches like that.
Jason, you want to talk a little bit about some of the, talked the other day about some of the protective items that for the workers and, as they go through the line.
Yeah, so like at the high school, the kids will actually still go through the lines. So we're gonna hang plexiglass from the ceiling over the lunch line to protect, between the students and the workers. We'll have plexiglass around the cashiers so that, there's a barrier between them there as well. As Denise was saying, at the junior high, the kids will simply need to hold their card up, and we'll have a tablet where, the cashier can walk around. Each kid has a tray. They simply just hold their card up. She can scan the card and then type in what they got. And so we're trying to take as much interaction that way out as we can. So.
Any other questions for Denise? Thank you. Just keeping going, some of the classroom guidelines. Let's go ahead and jump up. Todd, can you step on up and let's talk about cleaning while we're on that road. One of the items, I don't know, Jason or Todd, if you want to talk through, the district bought equipment earlier. So you just want to kind of talk about an overall, I don't know who wants to do that. Just.
Sure. I'll do it because Todd's getting his feet wet still in a lot of areas. And I kind of put the plan together. And we've met with the head custodians. We talked through the plan a little bit. High touch areas, water fountains, doorknobs, those areas will be cleaned every hour. Bathrooms will be cleaned every hour. As far as classrooms, when teachers are on prep, we're going to try to get in and spray the classrooms down with the disinfectant backpacks. We'll do that again at the end of the workday before custodians leave at night. They'll spray them down so we'll be ready for the next day. Each classroom is going to have a spray bottle in it with extra rags so that if students feel like they want to spray their desks down, clean it, they can. Teachers feel like there's an area, say as they saw a student sneezing multiple times, so they want to go over and wipe that area down, they'll have that ability. We'll have those in the room. We ordered a lot of hand sanitizer. We'll have that available throughout the building. We've implemented some new protocols with our cleaning staff as far as how they maintain certain areas, different uses for different rags, colors of rags, things like that, so we can identify how it's being cleaned, what's being used on it. We're getting ready to bring in an outside source to look at a new cleaning process, new cleaning chemical, which can be made on site. So we're not constantly waiting for cleaning chemical. It's a process that happens inside the building. It's a green clean, but it's also hospital grade. And so we're looking at a demonstration for that. And we're going to invite the other districts in the area in to see that as well. So lots of different cleaning things being implemented. It is going to be a much heavier load on our custodial staff because we're going to need more hands during the day when kids are there to make sure we can touch all the things we need to touch as a custodial team. So it's going to change how things are done from that perspective. So.
On page 18 are the items for cleaning and disinfecting, just the bullet points. I think you touched on those. One of the things that pointed out, and we had a discussion with the health department today about water fountains that, obviously not using the drinking part of the water fountain. The junior high, since they're all new, that's not going to be a problem. Some of the other district or buildings have a couple, but we have quite a few of the old ones. So I think Jason and maintenance guys in the past have altered those, right?
Right. At the high school, there's a couple of water fountains. There was an issue with water bottles being filled up in the lunch lines and this, that being sanitary. And so we actually modified the couple water fountains in the building with a very large spout that comes up and down with a little trigger on it. And it's worked for a little over 5 years. I think we've been using them. And so it's about $10, $12 fix to do that versus $150 part to make it from the manufacturer. So maintenance is in the process of building those for every double set at the high school. One of them will have the large spigot, the other one will be turned off. So we'll be cutting the number of water fountains in half, but they'll all have bottle fillers on them, so they get it that way. So, and then we'll be going around to each of the other buildings and equipping their water fountains that same way. So, and every building has a different model, so we're gonna have to change our adapter a little bit, but I think it should be fine.
So along those lines, we're allowing the students to bring water bottles and water, and then they'll have breaks, be able to get that instead of drinking out of the water fountain.
I do, it sounds like lots of plans for cleaning, which is heartening. I do still think it would be a great idea for the teachers if they have a list of the things that are going to be given to each one of them in their rooms, because you know as well as I do, they're out buying that stuff right now, trying to get ready for school. So, I mean, just whatever we're going to put in each classroom as far as the rags or if we just had a list that teachers got, this is going to be in your room for you to use as you need to or whatever, that would be helpful, I think, because otherwise they'll be buying their own rags
And we're working on that. And I know the principals today were working on the classroom list and adding some things to that to also help with cleaning. So, it's one of those things where it's totally different than what we've ever done. So
Right.
we're working on that list, yeah.
Thank you. Jason, you want to talk about the
Sure.
I don't know what the
Last
guards?
week, last week we talked about, or last month, or whenever we were in here last time, we talked about the sneeze guard idea, and we had one of our maintenance guys just quickly put something together out of scrap that he had, because we were finding is it was $160, $170 to get one made and ordered. So we were going to be able to make them for about $75. Stevens Industries has stepped up to the plate big time for all local school districts, and they have come up with these guards that are as cheap as we can make them. And so I say that, but now realize we have to order these by the end of the day, Thursday, in order to have them before school starts. So you're going to see me placing a very large order of sneeze guards with Stevens Industries coming up, but they have really stepped up, and they're creating some very nice materials for us to use. And they had a meeting last week with the local superintendents, and they showed what they had, and it's incredibly priced for the local. They're trying to really give back to the local districts, so really appreciate them. They also asked us, well, what would you like to have? So we've given them some ideas on some mobile teaching carts. So, if a teacher, foreign language teacher, needs to show how to move your mouth to make something, they can slide this in front of them on wheels. They take their mask off, they show, put the mask back on, slide it back out of the way. And so they took our feedback, and they are doing mock-ups of these different pieces so that we can see that and have a possible be able to purchase that as well. So my hat's off to Stevens Industries right now. So.
Thank you to Stevens. What about, I've gotten some feedback on the computer labs.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously it's probably difficult in most rooms to social distance and using every computer. I've heard of a couple of schools putting those dividers or those shields in between each computer station, basically, so that they can utilize each station and have more kids at those.
What we've done is we have actually, the tech crew is remodeling computer labs at the moment. and implementing social distancing in those computer labs. So
Okay.
either all computers face the same way, or we have some situations where they're facing the outside wall all the way around, and there might be a few in the middle facing one direction, but they are rearranging those. Now, I think we may have one lab that's just going to be a problem to do that, so we may have to look at something different there, whether it's hanging plexiglass between it, or doing something along those lines. One issue we are going to have is the keyboards, not only on desktops, but on laptops, because once you use alcohol wipes on them for about a week, you no longer have letters. And so we're trying to figure out what we're going to do about that. You can get keyboard covers for regular, well, we don't have any regular keyboards in here, but they're very hard to find those for the laptops. Kirk Hammer's been looking for those for several days, and he's having a hard time finding any that will fit our laptops. So our fear is we're going to wipe all those letters off the keyboard, and then what are we going to do? So we're trying to figure out a better way for that.
But that's all buildings we're looking at, social distancing in those computer labs.
Yeah, we've already done three labs at the high school. The library lab has been moved. Jeff Schaefer and Ellen Brummer's labs have been moved. We're going to the junior high, try to work on those later this week. So hopefully we'll have a plan in place. One of the junior high labs, Kelsey and I talked about earlier today, it's going to be a bear. There's 36 computers in that little room, and it's going to be hard to do. So
Thank you.
One of the, I just want to touch on kind of going through the areas in regards to special needs or IEPs. We just got that feedback from the attorneys, and so that's why it was added just since our last meeting. So that's all the gray area. But that's been vetted by the attorneys.
What page are you on?
It goes, starts on page 15, actually 14, bottom of 14 through 17. The at this point, what the district's decided is that Unit 40 will follow the IHSA, IESA return to play parameters. Obviously, they have kind of backed that off. IHSA did. IESA was going to meet this week. IHSA is having a meeting Friday, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the idea is, excuse me, if you're in option 2, you cannot participate in extracurriculars. So let me go to page 21, and this is the COVID return issue. We received a draft, a return to school workflow chart from our attorneys, and I shared that with the Department of, Effingham. It's not in that packet, but the county health department, and they had to look through that and ask that we take a couple of those things out because IDPH has kind of changed in the middle. And so, but one of the big areas that's coming up is how does it, if an individual exhibits one or more symptoms of, right now it's the direction we've received is if an individual exhibits one or more symptoms of COVID-19, but is not suspected to have a COVID-19, that they probably should be quarantined and sent home. Well, the issue is kids have seasonal allergies and ear infections and flu and strep throat. And so the question that we've had in discussion we've had with the health department for the last 3 weeks is we won't make it through a day or 2 days because we send kids home with a fever and a sore throat. But that doesn't mean that they have COVID. We don't know. We have no clue. That's not ours. So that's been a big issue for all of our districts, right? And trying to have that conversation. So what we kept hearing is IDPH is coming out with updated guidance for that. Well, there's a meeting Friday between IDPH, ISBE, and now IHSA is going to jump in where they're going to have what they call a tabletop discussion. And so probably sometime this weekend or maybe late Friday night or sometime or next week, we're going to get some guidance. updated guidance, which may change what this says in that area, right? Because that's one of the things we've asked is, look, we're going to send these kids home. I mean, we can't quarantine every student because we might as well not have, really, seriously, we can't have our schools. So that's, I think everybody in our meeting this afternoon, we had that discussion, and they're meeting Friday. And so we should have something. Now, whether we'll like it or not is something else, but we should get something probably, I don't know, over the weekend or early next week. It depends, I guess, on how that meeting goes. So I really can't tell you exactly what that's going to look like at this point. This was some of the items they talked about were, would they need a doctor's note to come back? Well, are we going to, is that every time? Do they, is it seasonal? Does the doctor have to say it's seasonal allergies? There's all sorts of questions. So that's kind of up in the air. So I've had a lot of questions. What happens if they're around somebody? Well, what I've told the health department is, look, we can't make decisions based upon rumors and Facebook. So we have to get a call, in my opinion, from the health department. And when I get that call, the CDC recommends you automatically close your school down from 2 to 5 days and you clean. So we had a discussion today about that. Well, if there's an outbreak, well, what's the definition of an outbreak? There could be 2 cases. That's what, right? But what about 1 case, right? Because I guarantee you, as I told Kurt and Tony this today, in most of our schools, our kids aren't in one classroom. They're moving to the lunchroom. They're moving to another, going back and forth to the class, to the restroom. It doesn't matter how much we clean. Now there's a supposedly a minute time period, that is out there. It's 40 minutes. But whether that stays that way, we don't know. So, quite frankly, I have to wait and see what the guidance is. But if we get a positive case in one of our buildings, we're more than likely probably looking at closing that building down for a period of time. So I'm just trying to be upfront with everybody about that, because we can't guarantee, and they'll, we'll talk about, well, are you, who have you been around? I mean, even in the classroom, it came up today that, well, if you were actually further than 6 feet away from somebody, and it wasn't it was only 15 minutes. Well, I'm not going to be able, I'm just telling you, I'm not going to sit here and defend to a parent, oh, well, it was only 15 minutes. And because we can't guarantee that. Our administrators can't do that in the building. We can't do that so I'm just trying to be upfront that this is something that, and it's becoming more and more, right? We're seeing more and more cases. Mm-hmm. What we're trying to do from the very beginning, I didn't start out tonight but saying this, but I've said it before, trying to keep as much normalcy as possible in a non-normal situation. And that's very hard to do, right? Everybody's frustrated. Everybody's struggling. Staff is questioning. Everybody questions. I question, so just trying to share with you everything that we shared information with the health department on what we received, and then they gave us feedback. And so with this other feedback that's coming Friday or over the weekend, that'll give us a better determination of where we go and what we can put in the plan for this. But if you look through this, just in regards to the return to health, we're going to be very clear. We get that call from the health department. The health department's going to lead the district in regards to the steps that they want us to take, because it's a health issue or so. So we'll make it in conjunction, but just want to be clear that, they're going to call us. They're going to say, hey, you have this or this, and then we'll start that process. And if that's depending upon the situation, more than likely, we're probably going to be closing school.
Will we close just one school, or does that close all the schools?
Well, I guess that would be determined upon the situation, right? Is it one student? Does he have he or she have 4 brothers and sisters? Are they in all the, those are questions that I'd have to talk with the health department about and say, what's your suggestion here? Because, if it's a single situation, then I would think it'd be one school. But that's on a case by case basis.
Do we have a quarantine space identified in each building? We'll probably have to use that regardless of the guidelines, right?
Well, maybe not. Well, just look at ELC. There are no quarantine areas. I mean, it's all open,
Right.
And if we have a quarantine space, then we've got to sanitize it and everything afterwards.
It's my office.
Yeah.
It's in the quarantine space,
So the answer is yes. It's
Right.
probably not where we want
Not
them.
ideal. It's a space.
It is a designated space.
Yeah,
Designated
is.
space. at
With a
least.
door. So
With a door. Right.
so, that's
Hopefully we'll have that by Monday's meeting.
well, yeah, that's the goal. Yeah. If not, then we'll bring it as soon as it happens and go from there. But the health department did look at pages 21 and 22 and 23. And I got that back just yesterday or late maybe it was this morning, the email that they've looked at that and they're okay with what's in here and it's appropriate. But again, we'll have updated information coming, and we'll add this flow chart once it gets updated we'll add this to the plan once we get it updated from the health department. Okay, so let's go back and talk about the school day, because that's a thing that is driving really a lot of other issues. As I shared with you, the number of students, right now we have 164 students. As far as staff, just in general, we've had a few staff indicate some concern that we have relatively very few that do not plan to come back. So the idea of being able to, at this point, being able to say, oh, we have, let's say we had 20 third graders, that if we had a third grade teacher or an elementary teacher, could they take that as their class and do remote learning? That's just not working out right now. Not saying it can't, not saying it won't, but that as of right now, we can't. I mean, if it stays at 10 to 12%, we're talking probably another, 100 kids? You had that number earlier.
12% be about 288 kids. There's 290 kids total for the district.
So another 130 kids. Now, how they're spread out, it's interesting that these have been spread out when I first looked.
It's pretty equal.
Yeah, even when the first time I looked, or I looked a lot of times, but last week when I looked, they were all spread out. It wasn't just one or the other. Now, once this gets approved, that may change. So one of the things that I was thinking about is once this gets approved or adopted, hopefully at the Monday meeting, maybe we push that back a couple days for that learning. We're going to still get learning option forms. We are. But we want everybody to fill one of those out, whether their child is in person or remote.
So explain a little bit, do we have any thinking right now? Let's just pretend like these numbers all doubled. I mean, maybe not, but could be close. So let's say that we had 30 first graders and 25 second graders, 20 second graders. So how are we thinking remotely we would handle those? Would we have a couple of teachers do remote, or are they going to distribute them?
Well, first of all, to back up, we've had conversations with the ECTA, And some of that has to be, is part of the negotiation part. So we've had discussions, but no finalization. We hope to move forward on that. I think with limited numbers, I believe administrators were talking about whether they had one or two, but as the numbers go up, that it be spread across.
So everybody may be doing remote learning
Possibly,
for a
yeah.
couple or three or four.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a decision that we were going to do at the building level. I think one of the issues, if we always have to keep in back in the mind of, we could be end up fully remote as well. Not that we want to, but that we might. I guess that would be a question. And if there's any feedback from administrators on that, we talked a little bit about that today, about having a couple that volunteer to want to do it versus multiple. And I think that's a case by case, building by building, grade level by grade level type of situation. Are there any thoughts or comments from administrators on that?
I would say from the high school's perspective, it's kind of a matter of a certification issue. I can't have an English teacher teaching science, and our kids have multiple classes. So, we've looked at and I've talked to teachers about possibly being able to take one teacher, maybe in English department, and they do all remote learning. Well, the problem comes down to, I've got some teachers who they're the only person in their department, so they teach all of those classes, or I've got single classes, for instance, or I got dual credit classes, for instance. And so each one of those things makes it problematic to do that, and be able to pull one teacher to teach all of those modes, and then nobody else has any. So again, it kind of comes down to the numbers. And if that does change, if you do that at the high school and that does change and everybody goes to remote, well, that's a whole new change as well. You might have to reshuffle students at that point. So
I was probably thinking more K-5. Yeah.
And you know what, if after 9 weeks, the parents decide to send them face-to-face, so that they would have a new teacher then? So we have to look at that as well.
And I think if everyone prepared to teach some remote learning, from, for example, third grade, we've got 12 kids, and each teacher's gonna have one or two, and they're working on that remote learning with those kids, then we get in a situation like Mark said, where we may have to go remote. At least they have prepared themselves to do that, and they're ready to go with it. So to me, that's might be a better way to go.
At the early levels, we have had conversations. It's a numbers game for us right now at preschool and kindergarten. Our preschool numbers actually office for those students are even our students. We have people signing up for preschool and not even students in the school need to address. But we're looking at the numbers because, like Amy said, we want to have that child development relationship with the teacher. But we know from our experience doing remote, we can't put 15 kindergartners on a Zoom meeting, and their feedback has to occur one-on-one, and that's what we found to be most effective in the spring was the time that my teachers spent one-on-one. Yes, we provided the learning videos. Yes, we provided the hands-on learning opportunities for the kiddos, but that most growth we're going to see is that time that teacher has with that student. So from my perspective, if the numbers warrant it, we would be looking more at having a teacher all day long teaching remote, because with our building, we could share the workload across the end of the day, but we need to be able to spend that one-on-one time with all of those kids, and it's probably not going to work in a schedule that every parent's going to be available from 2:30 to 3:30, or that every child in every building is going to be available. So if the numbers warrant, then we're going to be looking at probably having one teacher do remote. Some of the options, and there's lots of different ones that are floating, in my mind, as far as once we have that number, we would be looking at if they may have one teacher remotely, and if they come back to school, then they may go into another teacher's, classroom. Or there may be enough that come back after the quarter that at that time, that teacher assumes the responsibility for that in-class instruction. And then, we reassign the remote learners. It may not be the relationship we want, for a year-long relationship for those in remote, but that we have to think about the quality of
it's concerning to me that if every teacher has remote kids, that they only have an hour in the afternoon to deal with that after the end of the school day. So if there's a way to maybe even team them up with a remote person that handles calls throughout the day, that could provide feedback throughout the day, and then assign actual classroom teacher takes over at 2:30 or 3 o'clock, because we're asking a lot to be in the classroom from 8 to 2, and then, oh, what am I gonna do with my 2 or 3 kids that are at home that haven't had any feedback at all day long?
Well, one of the things that we talked about at our level would be, if I was a remote learning teacher, it may not be me that is creating those lessons. So for example, I might have one of my teachers is monitoring those remote learners that she's walking into and pairing up with
Another teacher.
for guided reading and doing that interactive read aloud with her. We might have another teacher that we highlight to do all of our Michael Haggerty phonics instructions. So the video clips that some of these kiddos might be seeing may not always be that one teacher. Now that one-on-one feedback time where they're sitting across, from the Zoom would be that remote learning teacher, but they may be getting some instruction from a variety of our teachers. That way it's not, that responsibility is not solely falling on them, and we can use the expertise of all. We start to get familiar faces with a lot of them, but we do have that responsibility where it might work for a family for that remote learning teacher to work with a child at 9 o'clock and with one family or noon and another. I know when we were doing this in the spring, my teachers were working throughout various time slots because you're working around parents either working at home or grandparents who have kids, and it's just not feasible that they can fit all of them in an hour. And it's a lot to manage teaching a whole class all day long and then move into become a remote teacher. I mean, we're going to increase workload where it's
Scares me.
optimize our expertise throughout the day. That's at least what we're looking at pre-K.
I think the one thing at the early elementary level that we have to look at and be mindful of is our kids are not independent in their ability to get on and effectively use the device. We're going to have to be mindful of parent schedules because they're going to have to support that child's learning in addition to the teacher. So it's going to have to be a team effort, and we're going to have to work with parent schedules. We can't just necessarily say, okay, 2 to 3:30 is the day, the time, 3:30 to 4:30, because that may not work with a parent schedule. So it's definitely going to be a juggling act, and it is going to be a heavy lift on our teachers.
Well, one of the items we added in there since our last meeting, or I believe since the last meeting, talked about classes that would not be available for option 2. And after talking with administrators, that those are really limited to the high school CTE vocational area. Felt that the others could be provided in that option. So preliminary discussions with the teachers union just in regards to time, the issue of the amount of work is going to be larger, especially, if we have the option of remote learning and regular. One of the comments and discussions that we had was, how do we do that if we have a regular full day from 8 to 3? Now, what's the next? I'm not saying it's the best. What's another option is going with the shortened day. And I think most districts are doing that, except for, I think Stu Strauss is going to go full day or planning on it to start with. So what I've proposed to the union, and have not had a final feedback yet, but the idea of going 8 to 2 for pre-K 8 and 9-12 going from 7:30 to 1:30. We talked about the work day for staff might need to be adjusted 15 minutes one way or the other. And that's something we were talking with the union about. But that's kind of what we're looking at, maybe at the high school level. We'd be looking at shortening the schedule, correct? Yeah. And so we would be having lunch at 12:40, well, 12:45, 12:50, where students would go through the day, and then at the end of the day, they could stay for lunch or they could leave. Because the lunch at the high school is going to be an issue. Just numbers. What do you have? You're figuring 280?
If we do 2 lunch periods, I'm figuring 360,
360.
right? So
But
to about 7:30.
the idea is not only at the high school level, but the elementary level, at least giving some time each day out of the workday for staff to address some of these. It's not going to be foolproof. I don't think there's an answer out there that's going to meet everyone's needs. Trying to just be as flexible as possible and trying to move forward. So I guess that's what I would put out to the board on the options are really having a regular day from 8 to 3, basically, or 8 to 2 for pre-K 8, and then 9, 12, 7:30 to 1:30. Just need you to think about that, and because that's something that really we need direction. And I will talk with the union again, because our previous discussion was they were going to have some discussion on there, and then we get back together.
One of
So,
the concerns I think that's already come out from some of the teachers, I know, I think Angie and I were both contacted, is that for the teachers with the 7:30 to 1:30 day or whatever, to have to be there at 7:15, some of the local daycares will not let you drop off your children until 7:15. So because these daycares have adjusted their hours too. And so that would be difficult for some teachers to drop off their children at 7:15 and then get to school for 7:30 start. So.
My question is, why did the 7:30 come up exactly? Just to add more time to the beginning of the day?
Essentially so that we're not starting a lunch after 1 o'clock.
And then we just say juggling the 2 times with health transportation too. If we had 2 different dismissals, 1:30 and no. Oh, okay. I thought that was going to help transportation.
In all honesty, I don't know. I mean, in all honesty, because until we see numbers,
Yeah.
how many people are
Okay.
working, I don't know what is going to work and not going to work. But it could make it difficult getting the morning more than anything. The afternoon, I think morning is more concerned. But also those numbers might make that difference if we get them. And it might be.
the option 2 numbers. Is that what?
Like the numbers of how many kids are gonna ride,
Oh,
like in the morning, so, with a different time. Just don't know if it's possible with a different time, if more kids ride than normal or not. I mean, especially the people that are out of town.
You get them there by
15,
7:30.
There about 7:30.
20 minutes, and then you have those other littler kids that, you don't want to go any better. So I pick them up and ride about that all the way down. But I don't know the numbers, so unfortunately, I don't have the answer.
I do like the idea about the dismissal at the high school so that students can either stay for lunch or leave for lunch, because that would certainly help some of the issues there, which I'm not sure there's a good solution for. I mean, if we have to feed all of it lunch or keep all of it for lunch. So I do like that aspect of it. I don't know about the other issues.
So is that something you're wanting us to think about to discuss on Monday?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with that being said, because we have just said earlier that we want to keep our stuff as normal as possible. So I do want to know what each maybe building administrator or any of our directors see as a pro and a con for certain things, such as the transportation, the food services, the curriculum, and this would probably be a curriculum meeting thing. We're going to lose a lot of time. What are we going to cut? If we're going to shorten the day, who's going to decide what areas we're going to take out to be able to meet their needs for the year. And what that's going to do for our community, basically the daycare. Those are the things that I'm kind of concerned about, that we need to know to be able to make that decision, whether or not we want to start early, whether we want to get out early, go from 8 to 3.
So to answer that, I don't know, Kurt's got an answer. Let's say the high school, for instance, would we have the same number of periods in that day and they would just be a
so,
shorter amount of time?
Essentially, we gain this by doing two things: shortening the class periods from 49 minutes to 41 minutes, and shortening the passing periods from 5 minutes to 4 minutes. You asked for pros and cons. Pros and cons of the passing period: one, we're shortening because part of it is it's less time to congregate in the hall for students and really kind of emphasizing that point A to point B kind of thing. Obviously, the con in this is you're losing, basically every week you're going to lose a day, right? So if you multiply that out, every you're going to lose a class period every day, or every week, I'm saying. So over time, that's going to add up. There's no doubt that that's going to add up. One of the pros that you asked about in this is the idea of, it's just the number of getting a lunch and trying to find a place to put 360 students and still practice the social distancing that we're basically asked to do. And really, for me, it's not even just practicing the guidelines. It's about how do I safely do this with 360 students. So that's obviously one of the gains there. I don't know if that kind of answer.
I think one of the things that's come up is, we still have to do remote learning. So we're going to ask our staff to teach all day and then do remote learning. And
There's got to be time.
There's got to be time for
Right.
that.
There is an option of using the same company we use for summer school with our high school remote learners and offer curriculum through there as well. That's what some schools are doing. They're using a third-party vendor for the remote learners so that their in-school teachers can focus on what they do every day.
And what is the program you're using now?
That'd be Ingenuity
Ingenuity.
is who we use. Was formerly Odysseyware.
Oh, okay. I'm familiar with that.
It's all board approved curriculum that we use for that. And then our teachers teach to the face-to-face students that they have every day.
And that's fine and a good option maybe for junior high, maybe and high school. It does cover junior high, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know what about grades K through 5?
We're already talking about focusing on reading, math, ELA, like social studies when we can, but, we've got to remember that we left school in March. We need to really focus and hit those areas hard. Not that science and social studies aren't important.
That I forgot. Excuse me. Thank you for sharing that. I'm more, we can cover the high school and junior high at a cost, right? But, and alleviate that for possibly those, help alleviate that. They're not saying we wouldn't, there has to be somebody overseeing it, right? But we still have to address the K through 5 and remote learning there. So
I just want to make this clear. I am not saying yes for a shortened day. I'm not saying no for a shortened day because I see both points of it. I just want to know from the directors and administrators standpoint, what you think would be best for your buildings. And that's why I had that's how this got brought up, was we do want to hear from you because your buildings better than anybody else. What you think is going to be best for your students, your staff, your parents. That's because the more information that we have, the better option that we all want to be able to work together on.
When Amy and I sat down and talked, one of the things that we brought up right away was we wanted to try to keep as much of a plan to what is normal as possible. So we looked at, what our arrival is going to be like. Obviously, we can't congregate in the gym and things like that, so we decided we would have to go classrooms. And we just went step by step throughout the day to try to make that as normal as possible and still follow the guidelines that are presented to us for the safety of the kids. But then the issue still, the remote learning issue still comes up because we have those numbers of kids that are out there. So how do we make that happen and still provide an opportunity for our teachers to use that time wisely, reach out to those kids, to communicate with those kids, They may have to do some of that during their prep time during the day. If their prep time falls at 2 o'clock and we're dismissing at 2 o'clock, then we're gonna have to work out something with them. Because I think we counted, there's gonna be eight classes, 8 teachers that are going to miss prep time if we dismiss at 2. There's going to be another 8 that their prep time is gonna be shortened if we dismiss at 2 because they start their prep time at 1:30. So some of that is affected as well. But the idea is try to keep it as normal as possible, but still provide that time. I think the dismissal at 2 o'clock, if you're asking me what I think about that, we've got to give those teachers time to be able to work like that because we're already asking them to do more.
So you're saying they need that time to dismiss at 2 o'clock? Is that what you're
As
saying?
much as I don't like dismissing.
I-
Yes, saying that.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
Well, my other concern was like, because I had kind of asked, like, it would be nice to hear what you guys picture a day in your building would be like from the student, from the time they get on that bus till the time they go home. When you're talking about like bathroom breaks or hallway going back and forth, for me, like, then I hear Kurt talk about how many students we could possibly have in the lunchroom. That's a huge red flag for me, which is why I'm curious how everybody sees their building going throughout the day. Just for, not only for my peace of mind, but for everyone's, I guess, just seeing where are the areas we need to work on, maybe that we have 360 students in a room, which I would be very concerned with. So.
Well, the start of the day at Central would be a change because we can't go to the gym, all of the students until 7:50 per week. So that would be one change. As far as the cafeteria, the lunchroom, we're going to utilize the cafeteria for 2 classes, the mentoring center for 2 classes, because we've always had 4 classes eating lunch at the same time. So we're using 2 locations. We're not having to change the number of lunch sessions or anything like that. We're just changing the location. So each grade level will be split up when they have lunch. 2 classes cafeteria, 2 classes in mentoring, and the remainder at recess. We're fortunate at Central, we have multiple playgrounds. We're fortunate at Central that we have a large grassy area. As long as we don't have days like we've had the last couple of days, we can take some mask breaks where they can go out and just walk and take their mask off and that type of thing. We talked about K through 5, K through 8, I'm not sure. Lanyards for when we do go outside, they can put their mask on the lanyard, so, that's taken care of. End of the day, we will see about the buses. I mean, we just don't know that yet. Parent pickup, we're normally outside unless the weather's bad. But this next year, we'll utilize the 3 music rooms, so we can have 50 in each one of those rooms. If we need more space, we can have the gym, or the hallway, I'm sorry. We'll be calling the students out by radios, which we do in inclement weather anyway. So that's a change, but it's still very functional.
Late bus, if we have more than 50 kids, half 50 will be in the gym, we use cafeteria for the remainder. We talked about transporting kids in between class and special. We would have the special teacher, because typically what we have is one group going in and one group coming out. So we're gonna have the special teacher go pick up a class and bring in class. When class is over, then we have to cut the class 5 minutes short or so to get those kids back, and then go down and get their next group and walk them to their classroom, gym, music, wherever that may be. So we're gonna transport them that way, so we don't have kids crossing each other in the hallway as often. We've asked the teachers to really talk about restroom break times, so that they may have to, stand at the door and send 3 boys and 3 girls at one time and wait till they come back and do their class that way, as opposed to sending them all down at one time, sitting in line hallway. So,
And they always talk with each other to kind of determine who would use the bathroom at what time, which class would go to the bathroom break at what time. So it'll be in the same format. Breakfast, we'll have 50 in the cafeteria for breakfast. If we need more room, they can wait in the gym until space opens up.
I appreciate that information. I mean, those are things that just, I know, cross my mind and some parents and obviously some staff, just different things.
There's a lot of talking points that we've met on, and then we got the staff come in and shared that information, got some feedback from them. So they were a part of kind of what we decided we would do. But it felt like, you know, spent 3 hours one day talking with all of them and trying to work through some of this.
So at Southside, kind of going to your original question about dismissal time, you know, I agree with Todd in relation to the early dismissal is definitely gonna give teachers that opportunity to, if nothing else, prepare for that remote learning option. The concern that I have is I don't have enough hours or minutes in my day for a 2 o'clock dismissal. I have teachers that will not have special. So that means students that would not go to art or PE or music. So that, how that looks is gonna be a little bit of a struggle for me to figure it out. And I'm not sure I can because I have, my art teacher and my PE teacher are the same person. I also have a cafeteria at Southside, and so I, you know, I can't have.
Doesn't have the
PE
space.
Start before my breakfast is over. My PE can't be before lunch has to be set up. My PE cannot be before lunch is cleaned up. So I'm extremely limited in when I can have PE, which again goes back to a scheduling issue. So that's a concern that I have. I have a great staff, so we'll figure out a way to make that work if that's what you decide. In relation to what a day would look like at Southside, we too will have to change what our beginning of the day looks like because we have students that come in and eat breakfast and they typically on a given year would wait in the cafeteria until we go outside for morning recess. Now they will come in and they either will eat breakfast or they will go to a classroom. That would be a little bit of an issue because my teacher day starts at 7:45, but I have students that start in the building at 7:30, so I'll have to utilize parapros in order to support that. We talked about, I'm going to move a couple of classrooms. So my art and my music rooms cannot support social distancing. So I'm going to move my speech classroom. I had that divided into 3 rooms. I'm going to eliminate that, have just speech in a devoted room. My guidance counselor, I'm going to move her to a smaller area so that my music and art can support the social distancing needs. So that is going to be something that has to happen here in the next week or so. In relation to bathroom usage, hallway, those types of things, bathroom breaks will have to be scheduled, which on a given year, that's typical. It will just have to look very similar to what Central is doing in relation to, we aren't going to be able to have a whole class in the hallway meeting. We're going to have to work on that. So in relation to like recesses, we've identified the east end of the building will use a specific entrance and exit. The midsection of the building will use a specific entrance and exit, and the west end will use a different exit. So we'll try to limit the way they cross over, like for recess or things like that. At lunch, the change will be, I have 4 classrooms that typically on a given year would eat lunch at the same time. They would eat and then they would go to recess. This year, there will be 2 classes that eat, 2 classes that play, and then they will swap. So, and again, using specific doors that they exit, specific doors that they enter. End of the day, I will have to add a parent pickup line because we typically stage parent pickup on the west end of the building. And our parent pickup line goes from the west end exit all the way down to the west end bathrooms. So in order to support the number of students, I'll have to have a first grade parent pickup line that's on the east end of the building, which will also be where the walkers leave. So we're gonna have to make a little bit of an adjustment in the end of the day routine as far as how walkers are dismissed versus how parent pickup is dismissed. If we have a situation where we have a first grader and a second grader in the building, their parent pickup would be on the second grade and I have fewer second grade classrooms, therefore I would anticipate fewer second grade parent pickup than I would first grade. We have thought a lot about how end of day busing is gonna gonna look, because on a given year, we have 2 buses that leave right away, and all the rest of our students are dismissed and wait in the cafeteria in their bus lines until the bus comes. That won't be able to happen this year, so we talked a little bit, I talked to Kristen about, just some options. They'll have to be dismissed from the classroom. The con to that is it adds time to our dismissal. First and second graders move at their own pace. So hurry at a first and second grade mind is very different than hurry in an adult mind. So that's just an anticipated potential length. And again, it's a numbers game depending on how many students we have. We've talked about how that could look. So it's gonna depend on the number of students that we have at the end of the day. Does that answer your question in relation to the south side?
Thank you.
My little people, I have to have 2 different plans, because of course I'm talking about 2 different buildings, so we'll talk first about ELC. We also have a cafeteria, which I love that word now, I'm gonna adopt it. But we also have the challenge at our building that our playground is a far distance from the building itself. And we also have just one option for a parent pickup bus transportation to go through the kids. So those are some of the hurdles that we had to overcome. Also just kindergarten and preschool itself, the curriculum. You know, what we want them to learn in kindergarten, you know, we want them to share, we want them to interact, and we are now telling them we don't want them to. So how do we teach those same skills that are just paramount to the success of the rest of the way? So we've had a lot of those types of conversations. How can we keep our kids safe but still, you know, address those skills? So a typical kindergartner is going to arrive. Usually our kindergartners have been housed in the cafeteria. We can't do that now. Only my breakfast eaters will be going to the cafeteria, and they will be served breakfast. The others will have to go to their classroom. Usually teachers aren't used to having kids in the classroom until 8 o'clock, but now we will have students in there as early as 7:30. Again, going to try to use the use of our paraprofessionals to support them, supervise them. At the beginning of the year, though, it's going to be everybody, just because they're little and you're not going to know how to function in a classroom. After they arrive, we are going to have very strict schedules and with use of the restrooms that are available. Another challenge to ELC is the fact that we are an open floor plan, which is wonderful and we love that, but when you're trying to keep germs contained, that open floor plan presents, you know, another issue. So we are just going to be very schedule driven. With regards to our specials, we have the same challenge. If we get out early, I cannot fit all of my specials in the course of the day as they are because of the same challenges Sherry talked about with the cafeteria. So we have talked about music has its own classroom, so we can fit all those music classes in. Currently, my PE teacher would have 2 classes of PE, see each class twice a week. I thought about taking one of those being a gross motor class when the gym is available or the outdoor area would be available. The second might have to become a fine motor PE class where the kiddos would go to stay in their classroom and my PE teacher would go in and we would work strictly on fine motor activities in order to be able to get everyone's special in the course of the day. Because as we move into dismissal, that has been our greatest challenge. Because it takes all of us to get our building loaded. Lunch, we're going to operate our entire building on a buddy system. So teachers are going to be in partners, and those partners are going to do everything together with regards to, they will only have recesses with that partner. They will also go to lunch with their partner. Then we can fit them all into the cafeteria. We are going to be using every table space that we have available. We will be bringing kiddos into the cafeteria. They will all be facing the same direction. 2 kiddos to a table. They will be served their tray, and they will get a chance to still have their recess after. We'll have a cleaning period between each lunch hour, and then the next group will come in. I used to have 3 lunch hours. I am now going to have 5 in order to accommodate everyone coming in through that, which again affects my special schedule because now I just eat some of that PE time. We've really spent a ton of time on the curriculum, what that's going to look like, because we can't have those free choice centers. So we've talked about taking things like in our block center, instead of teaching the kids that you have free choice on blocks, we might break those down into smaller increments so that each kiddo could be used to We obviously are gonna be able to utilize the flexible seating, so we talked about different ways to have the kiddos around the room, but they have to move and groove. They have to be able to have that movement. So we've been looking at some alternatives to maximize those learning opportunities. We also are setting up, the park district is going to be bringing us their five large white tents that they are using for their jumpstart camp. We are gonna set those throughout the areas or, the grassy areas so that there is an outdoor seating. And each family, so each pair of teachers will be assigned to a tent, and then they will work on a schedule to where maybe they take them out there and they can do their Michael Henry, and they can do a read aloud, they can build in their math bricks in conjunction with not losing that teacher time that's so valuable. So we will be optimizing some outdoor time. We're also looking at how could we revamp the west side of the building and perhaps put like a pavilion and awning up to where we could have a spot where, like, my speech teacher could get outside and do some speech instruction. My staff workroom is incredibly small and does not allow for social distancing, so I want to take care of them. So we're looking at putting some picnic tables out there, so it would give them an opportunity to, enjoy their lunch and have that social distancing, and they're not confined to their classrooms all of the time. Dismissal, like Sherry, my little people don't hurry and they have short little legs. So we are going to work with our buddies to keep those two classes together, because I do need almost 3/4 of my staff when it comes to dismissal every time. So it's a balance of using the staff to get them dismissed, but also supervise them appropriately, and we can't bring them all together like we did before in the front hallway to call them. So we're going to dismiss from the front of the building, bring our farthest classrooms up, and they will have an assigned location in one of the two interventionist classrooms. And then we will be taking away one of buses out, and then we will be bringing all of our parent pickup out. My late lessons, we are actually going to pull into an alternative location, probably in my music room, and we will have our paraprofessionals supervise them. But we are actually going to have them do learning activities, because they are going to have a long wait. And I don't want to lose that learning time, so we are going to have an identified skill that they're going to work on each day and have some plans for them. Same thing with the teachers who are supervising their classroom. We try to keep those learning activities going, because it takes us, on a normal year, it takes us 45 minutes just to get rid of our early bussers and our parent pickup. That's not just our late bussers. That's probably going to grow considerably. So when we talk about the 2 o'clock dismissal for us, we're going to be dismissing kids that entire afternoon. My teachers aren't really going to gain much time for those remote learning instruction, because they're going to be needed to get kids. That's why I'm looking more at the alternative. How could I use a teacher during the course of the day to meet my remote learning needs? Because it just takes so many of us within our building. I'll do my best to maximize the use of paraprofessionals and have them help support me. I always bring my teachers back in the classroom, and they know that. The minute, I can handle them on my own, I have them back, so they're planning. We'll do that again this year. But we are prepared that it is going to take longer, just because we have multiple ways of buses. We do have parent pickup, and we can't split them anywhere else to make it faster. They all have to exit that same door. The other thing we are going to do is maximize the use for our exterior doors, so that we can, if I have an exterior door and I can safely take my kiddos out to recess from that door, we haven't done that in the past. We usually left those doors closed. We are now going to use those so that we can get them out, get their masks off them a little bit quicker, let them have that break to the recess playground, rather than going through the building. Plus, then the germs are being spread, especially within the classroom. Specialists are going to come, pick up, drop off, just like the other weeks. We've done a lot of networking so that we have some similar practices. But again, try to keep that kindergarten experience as well as possible. Preschool is very similar, except we're going to have to have a radio system down there. We also, with preschool, are going to try to create a miniature playground there on the north side, where typically our mentors are coming and going, but without mentors and visitors coming into the building. We can use tricycles, and we have some castle in the house and a slide, so that way we can get the kiddos out there. Because in the past, we've always taken our preschoolers out as one collective large group. We're going to have to split that to where we only have 2 teachers going
Thank you, Jeff.
So, really, there's options, right? And part of it depends on the schedule decision that takes place. So in the morning, one of the options that has been talked about that has not been decided on, and really it's a union issue, is a teacher issue as well. The idea that students go directly to the first hour class. The drop off in the morning really depends on, because the morning is difficult, and the idea that students come to school over a long period of time. It may be 45 minutes that you've got people coming through the door, and that's true everywhere, whether it be drop off or, ours are students who are driving as well. So the other option is if they're not going to, and that's really maybe not a viable option in the end as far as getting to the teachers, is to take them to make them choose 3 separate areas. So one would be part of the large gym, one would be the small gym, the other would be the cafeteria, with the idea that you're going to choose, and that's where you're going to go. And if you're going to have breakfast, you need to choose cafeteria. If you're not, we're going to run the other ways. With the tables, we will reduce the capacity of each table by not allowing them to only sit so many students at a table, and then spread those tables out as much as we can in those areas in the morning. So passing periods, I've looked at a lot of things, but really the best that we can really do is open up the ends of B, C, and D wing, so the students can be outside. And try to move, if you've been in our building, the most congested place is you've got a spot where C wing comes in, and basically almost every student travels right in that one location at the same time. So part of alleviating that congestion is to open up the end wings and go in different directions. We did, and I can explain it to you, but we did look trying to do one ways. The problem is if you do one ways, there's only 3 wings that you can do that with. If you do one ways, then everybody has to travel down one of those hallways every hour, because there's only one of them that's one way, if that makes sense. And until you start looking it out, you think it's great, but then you go, that is not going to work. So bathrooms, really what we're going to have to do is set those expectations on the bathrooms and just monitor that. As far as limiting the number of students, giving them those expectations that you don't wait in the bathroom. It's almost coming back to the idea, this is what we use the bathroom for, this is it. Lunch is really going to depend on the schedule. So if we do a lunch in the middle of the day, essentially what I would have to do is third hour, which is right before 4A, I would have to dismiss half of those classes early. So you would have half of those students that would probably go, I don't really know exactly yet, but 5 to 7 minutes early. They would go down, get in line, and then probably all of them would move down to the small gym and part of the large gym during lunch, which also sharing that area with PE, because there's PE classes go on down there. From there, then you would let the rest of those 4A students leave. They would go get their lunches. They would be assigned to the cafeteria. We would assign them a location based on the class that they're in. So if you're in an algebra class, you may be in a small gym. If you're, whatever the case may be, to guarantee that we're going to separate them out and guarantee that they're going where they need to be going. Of course, then we would do that again for 4B and allowing that in early. Now, what I would do to try to equalize that time for a class is over a certain amount of time, I would flip the classes that are releasing early because they're not going to get as much class time. And so after, say, 4 weeks or after whatever we determine what we want to do, we did a 9-week period, we could try to divide it 4 and 5 or 4.5 weeks, whatever the case may be. At the end of the day, again, depending on schedule wise, if we're doing lunch at the end of the day, I would release those students who are not staying for lunch, I would release them at a certain time, and then 5 minutes later, we would release those students who are going to eat lunch, just to alleviate the number of students that are actually moving to the hall at the end of the day. I don't think there's anything you want to know more specific about.
Thank you, Karen. Kelsey.
So junior high, with the new parent lane in the back for drop off, that'll have entry for students coming in there as well as the rotunda like we had in the past. So that'll be a little bit different, but that was happening anyway. So we'll have 3 spaces outside for kids, potentially 4 depending on weather because of the grassy area. We will need some lanes painted or some lines painted for playground. I heard that wasn't an issue, just to make sure that we're following the social distancing at arrival in the morning. As long as they're, social distancing, they can remove masks. Some things that are going to be different, directional hallways. So on the ground floor, you'll walk north to south. That stairway will be an up only, and then you'll walk south to north, and then the other end is a down. We're closing the middle
So we've got some directional arrows that are gonna be ordered, so that'll help with that. We are going to suspend the use of lockers, just because that's more social gathering, the kids are closer. We don't have enough lockers to space them, 3 between like we needed to. So students could carry backpacks, they'll have all of their own school supplies and materials on them all day, so that'll limit sharing and having to sanitize. The water bottles will help also. As far as hallways and bathrooms, kind of the same policy as what Kurt had talked about. If there's not an open stall, get out. Teachers had talked about letting 1 to 2 students go if they weren't able to go during passing, because our passing is only 3 minutes. As far as classrooms, we had a few teachers talk about setting up one-way directional, so you enter this way and you walk that way. We're fine with that. Sanitizing between hours. Cafeteria was pretty easy for us because we have 3 lunch hours, so each grade, half the kids would go outside, half the kids would eat. We've got a wall that's being built so that we can do 50 and 50 on either side, and then they switched. And so that's how the directional stairways work also. So you would go up one way and come down the other, no passing, we have time to sanitize. For lunch, you talked a little bit about the scanning already, so they would just hold up their lunch cart or lay it down in front of them, and Kathy could come around and scan it, so it's a no contact. Water fountains, we talked about that. PE, get out as much as possible. We have the small gym and the large gym, so that shouldn't be a problem. Not dressing. And then the dismissal. So the late bus gets a little bit hairy, but we do have the large gym. We do have locker rooms that we could utilize if we need to, and then we also have the stage area. So we could use all 4 of those spaces for the 50 students. Questions?
I do have one question.
Oh,
And then
about 2 o'clock. I didn't touch base on the 2 o'clock either. So we would shorten every period roughly 9 minutes. I have concerns also because they've already missed so much school, and so we're shortening the day, but I understand teachers need planning time also.
The other question I had, and this maybe is for every building, I'm not 100% sure, but we have students who ride a bus, I think, and wait from St. Anthony and maybe Sacred Heart. Is that right? So when those students come in to wait for a late bus or whatever, where will they be? Is there going to be a designated area for them in your building so they're not with the other students and keeping a minimum? Where would that be? Do you have?
I don't remember, it's been a number of years since we've had kids from St. Anthony to Sacred Heart come to Central, transition or transfer to another bus, have to come inside and wait. So I don't know if that has occurred in several years.
Okay.
So, I mean, but if we have that.
At the junior high, they come to my space. And so we could utilize, like I said, the stage area, so we could have them come in and go up on the stage. We could utilize one of the locker rooms.
Okay.
Those are just some options.
Okay. I just didn't know if we had an idea with those students.
Yeah, there's all kinds of junior high.
Now, at Southside, we do have where maybe they have a sibling at ELC or at Central and they're a parent pickup. Those students come to Southside. Typically, on a given year, they would come into the building and go through the building to their parent pickup line with their sibling. Now they'll have to use the outside sidewalk and just meet their sibling on the outside.
Anybody have any questions?
I have a few things.
Sure.
So I have time is going to be on my side at all. So junior high is new. We have the new road that goes all the way through Richland. And then, but the Richland, or not Richland, I'm sorry, the circle drag is still going to be there and there's still going to be this. I'm going to need help at that turn because I know you guys are going to direct parents to come in heading to the, coming in from the east and west to go to parent pickup, which is now that 1 lane from 4 lanes previously. So it's 1 lane behind the school. And you have parents coming this way, it's gonna block those buses that can't leave. Because that road runs right in front of the school now, like for the buses that exit, it's blocked. So if those parents don't follow directions, then we're sitting and we're waiting and we're sitting and we're waiting. And we're gonna be doing that a lot anyways, because the other concern, the more parent pickup. So these lines are gonna be longer, everything's gonna take longer and at a lot of places. Like with Sherry talked, she's going both ends of her building. Special ed picks up at the one, so like having a parapro out there, somebody stopping traffic when that bus comes to pick up those kids. Those kind of things are gonna be critical, because otherwise these kids are waiting longer with these masks on. Now they're only sitting on a bus with masks on, waiting at all these different places and locations. And it's gonna be tough for drivers to keep their, I'm pretty sure it's gonna be it's gonna be tough to keep those kids occupied and as we wait, because, I mean, Jennifer, she already left out early before, like you said, she's gonna lose even more time. So if I can make her school the last school, that could help her, but then Central's not actually, you guys are gonna be okay. But if the high school is out early, then we're gonna have that problem of where the buses are gonna start, which is gonna cause lots of waiting times if the parent pickup lines are longer. This is all being said, not knowing any numbers, so I am, the more help we can have out there in those areas of, or more of the time frames, I guess, of where traffic's gonna get backed up and whatnot, is gonna be huge to keep the transportation part running smooth. So if, like I said, some of the junior high, south side, I know will be really big, and then high school, I mean, it's not really an issue at all. I have a feeling there won't be a lot of kids that's gonna want to hang around. They're gonna catch a ride here and there, so.
Well, I think one of the things to remember is whenever we change a process, like this isn't going to look like any other year. And so we've, I think we had an idea of what the junior high was going to look like in a normal year, but even the first day on a regular year is chaotic, whether it's dropping off right there to the north side of the gym like we have in the past. Even if we put out those signs, people, but I know we changed it out at Central back and forth a couple times, but finally it's now people understand the process, at least. So it's going to take some time to get that process. I think we'll have to look at all options and trying to get help and people there, whether it's from central office, whether it's from, the city. We could talk with them as well. Don't know, I don't want to say that they will or won't because I haven't talked to them, but that's somebody that we would talk to. But once we get that set and what we think will work, we'll have to implement that and continue on a day-to-day basis. And hopefully over time that people understand they're coming to pick somebody at the junior high. They need to come from the east and not turn off a 40 onto Richmond. Now, can we put a barrier out there? I don't know. That's something I'd have to talk to the city about. And
I just wrote a note, call the city.
And it'd be good where people couldn't turn.
Resource officer out there.
Right. But then we also need that person probably down at Central, as well. So the idea is you just can't do that without, but would it be advantageous to put a barrier there so people can't turn off 40?
Yeah.
Yes, because that would help with the buses coming out. So those are things we've talked about or looked at. So yeah, it's going to be different. And so I think we're all going to have to be flexible as we move forward. It's not going to be perfect. It's just not going to be perfect.
We'll help as much as we can. The sooner we know the numbers, the better.
I'd like to thank all of you and your staff. I know you've spent a lot of time brainstorming and trying to solve all of these issues, or at least come up with a plan. I guess solve isn't the word. And you look very calm and collected on the surface, even if the panic is just underneath there. But thank you. I know it's a challenge for all of you right now.
I also want to agree with what Robin just said. And we also appreciate the fact that you all were able to come here tonight. It was very important, I feel like, for us to hear from you. We do support you. We want you to know that. We might not say it enough, but we do. You guys work very hard. I know a lot of you aren't 12-month employees, but you've still been, and I've drove by when I've come to town, I've seen several of your vehicles at work. Days you really aren't supposed to be here, but you are because you care. So again, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for giving us your ideas on your buildings. And just thank you for everything that you've done, because you guys are a great group of people that I do think very highly of. I've thought about you guys a lot the last couple of weeks, and just the questions I've got, I can't imagine what you have from staff and parents. So thank you very, very much. Do you have anything else for?
Is there anything else that you need that I didn't bring up, didn't go over from our meeting today or from the administration? Don't think I've missed anything, but.
I've got a quick question. As far as whenever you said something about no visitors to the building, you said that earlier, right?
Mhm.
And I just asked because with this new position I'm in, I have a lot of outside companies coming in and all that. I'm just asking what direction I go with that.
Well, my guidance.
I mean, they're coming from like Missouri,
Right.
Chicago, like
My guidance is, and to the principals as well, when we say visitors, we're talking about those that are, you have a right as a building principal to make a decision that this person needs to be in your building. Just, so I'd ask that you go through them. We do have a form that anybody that comes in the building needs to fill out that they've self-certified. So every time they come in, they would need to fill one of those out. Now, if they're going from building to building, then we probably ought to just make a copy and so they have it, so they.
Is it possible to have them check in with the board office and have a particular visitor sticker or something? Because here's what happens, they come in, we don't, and they can be anybody.
Unless one of us are with them, yeah, you have no idea.
I have no idea who they're with, or if they're with Hilliard, or if they've got a Hilliard shirt on, or something along those lines. Is there a way to have them check in either with Todd, and he's got a sticker for them, or with anybody, and through that process, I mean, we can still individual building wise, I guess, have them sign off. But in some regards, is there a way to have them do that?
Well, yeah, I mean, we could do that. I think, I don't see that as a problem.
Now, I don't know if there's after hours issues, but maybe that's not an issue if they're there after hours, I don't know.
I mean, anybody that comes to your building, they ought to be checking in with you anyway in your building.
We don't know who they are. We don't know who, I mean, anybody can show up here you show up with a dollar, you can get in the door. Because you just say, I'm making a delivery, or I'm doing this or that or the other. I'm just saying, here's what we did, this is what we did with Jason. Jason had a bunch of our visitor badges, and those guys checked in with him, and he gave them one of our visitor badges, is kind of how it works. So that's how that came up, that's what we did in our building. Now, I don't know enough about it to know if some of those guys don't hook up with you before they go to the buildings, and they give you.
Well, for the most part, they do, but then other times, like if they just run into something, they're like, hey, I'm here to do this, hey, I'm here.
I mean, I'm not trying to be, if it can't be done that way, we can't, but I'm just making a suggestion.
Well, that's something you can work out. Todd can work that out.
Okay. Do we have anything else for the discussion?
I mean, the goal is for Monday, taking this feedback, if there's other feedback, but this would be on the agenda for Monday for adoption. If we get additional information, I'll share. But it could possibly change even after an adoption, right? So just want to be clear with that for everyone.
Nothing else then? We would need a motion to adjourn to closed session for the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors or specific volunteers of the district or legal counsel for the district, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor or volunteer of district, or against legal counsel for the district to determine its validity. However, a meeting to consider an increase in compensation to a specific employee of public body that is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with this act. Give a motion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion Brad, second Kathleen. Roll call.
Jill Winley,
Yes.
Jane Willenberg,
Yes.
Kathleen Smith, yes. Angie Byers.
Yes.
Robin Klosterman.
Yes.
Brad Waldorf.
Yes.
At this time, we'll be going into closed session and we will return shortly.